So I got those new long johns.
Yes.
For this cold Canadian winter, and they're pretty awesome.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, they're like this like, synthetic kind of material, but it's like a non-itchy, irritable type material, so it's pretty good.
Awesome.
Yeah, it's comfortable. It fits my legs and my
your parts. Other parts of your body.
It fits all the contours very well.
Keeps them all tight and tucked in.
Yeah. But not like there's no squeezing. It's just everything's kind of cupped.
Like one would cup a bowl of soup by the fire in the winter storm.
Soup is the best during the winter, I think.
Yes, it is. This is not an ad for Long Johns, by the way.
Or soup.
Yeah. Or winter.
Yeah.
It
No.
is, in fact. The episode about Lord of the Rings, Fellowship of the Ring.
Book number 1, film number 1.
Yeah. Well, actually, isn't Lord of the Rings separated into 9 volumes?
Yeah.
And there's 2 volumes per book?
It's something like that.
Oh, wow.
Because, oh, dear. I guess I haven't finished puberty.
Yeah. Okay, they're choir boy.
Yeah, because it was originally made as just one book, like one big-ass book. And I remember you and I, we went to Chapters and we saw it, and it's like the size of 3 Bibles put together plus like an encyclopedia.
Yeah.
It's really fucking big.
It's ginormous.
Fucking big.
And it has all the pretty illustrations by Alan Lee, the most amazing Lord of the Rings illustrator ever.
Yeah.
It's great.
Yeah, he's incredible. He uses, I noticed, like, because Selena and I, we watched part of the extended Blu-ray special edition.
Yes.
Costs $40 Canadian. Worth every penny, I'll
That's
tell
like
you.
$16 in US, by the way, but
Yeah. Yeah, and in, like, I guess, like, in Europe, it'd be, like, 150 euros or something like that. It's really cool, and it showed, like, it was all behind the scenes and the production process for the films, and it was just so incredible, right? Like, just the amount of effort that went into making the films is just, it's beyond comprehension. I mean, as someone who has no concept of how much work actually goes into a film, especially in the early 2000s when everything was not CGI'd.
yeah.
Like, there was still a lot of CGI, but a lot of it was, like, actual costumes, real armor, like, real swords are made, all that kind of thing. It was cool because it kind of took us through every single part of the process. Like, so we got concept art, then we have, like, 3D models and programs. Like, there was that funny program that, like, you see the characters as, like, these really basic polygon looking things.
Sim type.
Yeah.
Like Sims 4 or something.
And it'll show the scene or the take, the camera take, and it looks exactly as it is in final production. Of course, it's, you know, you have the actual actors and you have all the special effects. But it was just really cool because it gives them, like, a rough feel of how the scene is going to look. And
all the movements and camera angles were all kind of, like, established in those, like, storyboard scenes. And they basically storyboarded the entire thing before they actually filmed, so they didn't waste time. Which is, like, incredible, because otherwise you would just have unlimited creativity, like, on that day on the set about how you want to kind of film everything, and it would just be bonkers.
Yeah.
One of the production managers said they wanted to create a world that seemed like it was already existing, basically. So to do that in a film where it's only 9 hours, and for us that 9 hours is a long time, but in terms of, like, creating a whole mythology and ancient ruins and all this back history, like, you had to put an enormous amount of detail and work into everything. So yeah, and that really shows, because you don't see every single detail when you watch the film, but that still somehow translates into how, like, fantastic and, like, real and authentic all of that looks.
You really get the sense that every single detail, even upon repeated viewing, you're not going to catch all of them, because it's impossible, because there's millions. All right, so everyone's favorite thing, summarization.
Woohoo!
So what happened in this film, Shalini?
Okay, so we are introduced to the world of Middle-earth by none other than Galadriel, who is this hot-ass elf who has lived for about 10,000 million years. And basically there's a rising evil. And the evil resides in no other place than the Shire with Bilbo Baggins, because he has this ring of power that the Dark Lord Sauron wants to...
Bom, 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 bom.
Yes.
And he cuts you off, too.
Yeah, exactly.
Whenever you want to say something.
That's how arrogant he is.
Bom, bom, bom.
Yeah, so he wants to get his bitch ass back into the physical world because he is a revenant currently. So he wants to get the ring. Basically, we go on this journey of Frodo, who is the nephew of Bilbo, traveling with the ring, and he ultimately has to carry the ring into Mount Doom to throw it into the fire whence it came and destroy the ring forever. And in this film, in his journey, he has a fellowship, which is the titular sort of concept of this first film, where he has a whole camaraderie of different multiracial people who kind of help him along on the journey.
Yes.
Oh, yeah. that was a plot summary of the entire thing. Yeah. But, yeah, there you go. Anything more?
So the hobbits leave the Shire.
Mm-hmm.
They end up in Rivendell after some important events that we're glossing over. And then that's where the Fellowship officially forms. And then Frodo undertakes this immense task of carrying the ring all the way to Mordor.
Yes.
Because it's determined in that scene that no one else is really able to rationally decide who can carry the ring. So Frodo just steps up and is like, I'm going to take it.
Yeah.
Because you can see like everyone else is bickering and arguing, and there's an impasse. Yeah. I think it's a bit different in the book. Mm-hmm. But anyway, they travel. There's lots of nice New Zealand landscapes. Yeah. And before you know it, they end up in Moria, and that's where Gandalf dies, allegedly. Supposedly.
Yes. Yeah.
And the party escapes. They go to Lothlorien.
It's my favorite place.
Yeah, it's very, very cool. They're given elven, like, goodies.
Yeah.
You know,
loot bag.
Yeah, exactly. You know, and then, so they continue on down the river to the Falls of Raros, and then they get off, and Uruk-hai are chasing them, and Boromir dies. And then that's when Sam and Frodo split.
Yeah, from the rest of the group.
And then Merry and Pippin are taken as captives. And that's pretty much where the film kind of ends, is, you know, yeah. But,
There's a lot to it.
There's a lot more to it. But for the most part, essentially, like, they get their asses out of the Shire. They go, there's some crazy things that happens. There's an understanding that this is a really, like, bigger task than they ever could have imagined, really. It's established that this task is of vital importance, and that literally the fate of the world and of the living races is at stake here. And obviously later it gets way worse because it just turns into a giant war.
Yes.
But at this point, it's just they're setting out with lots of uncertainty, and all the characters have to muster their courage to meet the challenge. So
a shadow under threat. That's basically what it is, because it's lingering in the horizon. And then it manifests in the later films. And what's interesting in the extended edition of the first film is that there's a lot more emphasis of realizing that this journey is not a fellowship journey. It's not an 8-man journey. It's just the journey of one hobbit accompanied by another hobbit, at most. Like, it's a very solitary.
Yeah.
I was gonna say solitudinous.
Yes.
I don't know if that's a word.
Yeah.
Solitary journey. So even though there is like a theme of camaraderie and fellowship and loyalty, which we'll get into later, it is a very singular sort of journey that you have to let someone go and complete the task for you, and you have to realize that nothing is certain and you can't control everything, and you just have to let the person who can just go and do it. So my relationship to the books are, I was actually quite old when I started reading the books. I was like 15 or 16. I just got them from the library and just read them in a year or something.
But, it's such a technical understanding of their trade order.
It's like the reality of Middle Earth is like really emphasized upon, because when we think of Lord of the Rings, it's like, oh, this mythic legend and like good versus evil and like flimsy whimsy. But then like the actual people in the film, like in the production, no matter like if you love the films or if you think Tolkien would have shat on it or something, like you still can't deny how much effort they put into making it a real gritty Middle Earth. So basically, we were thinking about the book relation to the film, and we thought that would be a great way to kind of talk about both without crossing into too many different territories. So in this episode, we kind of want to answer a single question. How did Lord of the Rings, which is a book genre that was so niche, translate into such a viewable film for a mass audience? So we talked a little bit about behind-the-scenes production stuff, but I think we're going to go through a series of mini questions just to get in there and see what like characters and themes and concepts really make it such a universal sort of film for such a wide audience. Yeah.
Like my relationship to the books began quite a long time ago, and it's funny because I started with the Two Towers. I would have been like probably 8 or 9 years old, and it was in my elementary school library. And it just seemed cooler because the specific design of the cover of Two Towers for the edition that I had one of those ring wraith serpent beasts that they would ride, kind of circling around the towers, sort of thing. It was probably done by Alan Lee or John Howe or whatever, but I don't know. It was more alluring than the Fellowship cover, and I didn't really know until I actually like picked up the book and I said, oh, it's part of like a 3-part like series, you know, and I didn't really understand what was going on because you know you pick up like the middle book in a trilogy, you're kind of lost. But I remember being kind of immediately taken by how detailed and immersive and well written like the book is.
He's so unapologetic in the way that he writes. Like, even in his foreword, he's just like, this is, like, people are going to say it's too long, and then my fans are going to say that it's too short, but I'm just going to write whatever I want. And even in the behind the scenes, they kind of talked about how you don't edit J.R.R. Tolkien's work. Like, he is the editor himself. So I think I have 3 of the many. But I think the most imagistic one of Fellowship of the Ring is probably when Gandalf comes to meet Frodo. I think that's my favorite like dialogue exchange, is Frodo like sitting under that tree reading a book, and then he sees Gandalf, and then he's like, "What's Gandalf?" And then like Gandalf says his famous words about being late or never being late. So I think that whole wagon ride is my favorite part of the films. But then I love the action scene of Khazad-dûm. I think that's one of the most fantastically filmed like scenes ever, and I just have eternal love for the Lothlorien elves as well, so I can't leave them out. The whole scene with Galadriel and their palace and stuff, it's so aesthetically pleasing to me, and it just has like a big place in my heart, so I think that's my third one.
My favorite scene in The Fellowship of the Ring is Moria. It was quite long, actually. Something that's really interesting about the scene is it has this kind of cold to hot progression, because it starts off, it's very like dark and then blue when they're kind of just entering. And then it gets to the point where like here's Gandalf staring a Balrog in the face, like fighting with him. So, yeah. But I gotta say, like probably the most epic take in the film for me is when the staircase of Moria, they're escaping down it, and it's just collapsing, and it has that music, and it's just fucking awesome. And because it has the entire Fellowship there, so the sense of urgency, and there's camaraderie, and they're trying to escape, and you have goblins like trying to shoot them. It was interesting that how they designed the set, like they did miniatures, and they had sculptors, and it was just so brilliantly made because it feels real. It feels like this is actually a place deep in the earth that you go into, and like this used to be a dwarven civilization that lived here.
Yeah, exactly.
And there's been battles, and there's been decay, and there's been, the Balrogs fuck shit up here and there.
Yeah. That's what I really like about the film, is that it shows a lot of backstory in moving the plot forward. We don't really know about the dwarves that much, but then when we go into Moria and we see like all the dead skeletons, and you're like, oh shit, like something's happened here. Like you can feel the encroaching corruption of Mordor.
Yeah.
And it's just incredible that they can like have that backstory while still having like all the action and the fire and the Balrog like and so it's just kind of amazing how they put that lore into it.
Yeah. It's interesting how Gimli really feels like he's a perfect representation of what the dwarf would be like. Because I think because he's the only dwarf that we really see. I mean, there's a couple at the council in Rivendell, but they don't really say anything. Gimli is the only dwarf really throughout the entirety of the trilogy that we, are acquainted with. But even just in him as a character, you get so much about the culture, and you can see like he loves axes, and dwarves like clearly love axes, and like he has this like geometric armor, like his helmet's very distinctive looking.
His attitudes towards like nature.
He loves drinking. He loves eating. Like immensely,
He's just this big bro, basically.
Yeah. I think he's one of the lesser liked characters in the film. I mean, I think people like him, but I think that people are like, oh, I love Aragorn and Legolas, and I like Frodo.
Yeah. All the pretty ones.
Yeah, exactly. Because he's a very homely, stout kind of like figure.
Yeah.
But I liked him quite a bit. He's very funny. I mean, he's a source of great comic relief in the film anyway.
Definitely.
Yeah. But
I think many people can relate to Gimli's sort of situation as the sort of class clown. I guess that's basically what he is. So they all have their little stereotype, I guess. Aragorn's like the emo bad boy. Legolas is like the preppy guy.
Totally.
Who just does obvious things all the time.
Yeah. The orcs are coming.
Yeah. Blood has been spilled this night.
Yeah. Oh yeah, with the skies all red. Yeah.
Like, thanks, Legolas.
Yeah. And he speaks in a very prophetic kind of way. It's interesting. Yeah. I kind of got that impression from the book, actually. And the funny thing is that I watched the trilogy before I read the trilogy fully, like full and through.
Right. Yeah.
So arguably my imagination is heavily influenced by what Peter Jackson and his team did on screen, but I definitely got that impression that Legolas is both severe, but also he's, like your typical elf. He's
just your typical elf walking down the street, you know.
Beautiful, well-spoken, elegant,
gentle. Unless there's orcs around.
Yeah.
But this is a nice segue to ask, who is your favorite character?
Yeah, there isn't only one, there's something to like about every character in the films. It sounds like a cheesy kind of remark. That's easy. Yeah. But in terms of ones that I really like, Gandalf is probably, I guess, my favorite. So I think he's the most mysterious out of all of them. Yeah. I mean, Aragorn is too, but Aragorn later on becomes a lot more enmeshed into the world, because he starts off, he's this kind of strider, right? Yeah. He's this ranger from the north. And we don't really know anything about him, but then it becomes, oh yeah, this is the guy who is like the titular character of the Return of the King. Yeah. So, whereas Gandalf, he's friends with this dude named Saruman, and they're wizards, and he's like at least several thousand years old.
Yeah. He has fireworks.
Yeah. He has magical powers. He's incredibly wise and intelligent. He also has like the prophetic kind of nature to him. Yeah. He can foresee things sometimes. And
he has a million nicknames. Yes. Mithrandir, Stormcrow,
Greyhame.
Oh my god. What do the hobbits call him? Is it just Gandalf?
Yeah, like just Gandalf.
The wizard, something like that. The wandering pilgrim or something.
Yeah.
Something like that.
Yeah. Yeah. And of course he's based off of Odin from Norse mythology.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Because one of Odin's forms is this traveling kind of tramp, like someone who wears long robes and carries a walking stick and is always kind of traveling around. Apparently that's what Tolkien based Gandalf on, partly, you know.
He's also a Jesus figure.
Yeah.
He's Jesus.
Of course, towards the end of the film, spoiler alert, Gandalf dies.
Yes.
He's dead. Yeah. But of course, in the, we're going to talk about it when we do the Two Towers review discussion. He comes back.
Ta-da! He's back, bitches.
Yeah. Jesus isn't the only one that resurrected. Like, there's a whole bunch of other gods and goddesses that get reborn in different mythologies and religions of the world. So it's like hardly like a new theme.
Yeah.
But rebirth is like a big theme.
Yeah.
At least in that moment.
My favorite character is probably Frodo. And yeah, I know this is unexpected. Because Morgan and I have talked about a couple other podcasters, namely Game of Thrones Academy, where they talk about Lord of the Rings, and they compare the book and the novel, and one of the guys just hates the film Frodo because he's like this like wimp. He's like this effeminate wimp compared to like the hardy like 50-year-old Frodo in the books. Who's like this like plump little like dude who's just like, I command you, Gollum. But I really enjoy the rendering of Frodo as a more like sensitive and like knowledgeable and a little more different than the rest of the hobbits. Like everyone else is kind of dressed in like these warm like tones, but he's in more like a silver and green and dark brown. And
it's true. Yeah, I didn't really notice. Yeah.
And Elijah Wood has a more elfin look. Like his nose is very like straight, and he has like these beautiful like knowing blue eyes, and has this like nice head of brown hair. That's not his hair. It's a wig. But I feel like he adds this sort of like feminine energy, which we also discussed earlier, that the books in particular doesn't really have. It's more about like this masculine energy of just pursuing this quest and being unafraid but I think Frodo does that like so beautifully because he like embodies this androgynous sort of being, so even like female audiences can really like understand and empathize and all that kind of good stuff. I just think it's awesome, and I love Frodo's like he acts like he knows a lot of stuff because of Bilbo. Like he knows like elfin language and all this kind of stuff about Middle Earth and the lore and all this kind of things. So he wants to go on these adventures, but then he realizes like how scarring those adventures can be. So I think he's just a great character.
It makes sense that for the purposes of the film, they have a less masculine character when the cast is principally almost all male. Yeah. And of course, it was discussed when we watched the behind the scenes thing. Folks, like, you really got to pick up the copy of this like extended Blu-ray crap, whatever.
Yeah. Great Christmas gift.
Yeah. Yeah, seriously. It's fantastic. They talked about how they made Arwen more important than she is. And I remember reading the books and going, like, she's really not that important here. Yeah. And even to Aragorn, he's not thinking about her seemingly as much as he is in the films.
Yeah, that's
like,
very true.
He's very smitten and like longing to see her again. And it makes like, for like a good, like for the purposes of the movie, it's like, it's the romantic love story amid like all this chaos and bloodshed that's abounded in these films. But I do like that you have in Frodo a complex male character who's not just like the stoic badass Kingslayer, Dragonslayer type, but really none of them are. Yeah. Even someone like Aragorn, who's probably like one of the most masculine characters, there's a complexity. Like you can like these characters, they feel complex emotions. Like they feel sorrow, they feel doubt, self-doubt, guilt. Yeah,
like
big,
Boromir.
Big one. Yeah, big. And they feel camaraderie that goes beyond just brotherhood. There's like loyalty to one's nation, their wives or like their girlfriends or whatever. Yeah. Presumably, like It's weird. Do any of them have girlfriends
I don't
besides
know.
Aragorn?
I think Gimli has a... No. Never
No.
mind.
It's
I don't know.
Frodo and Sam don't.
Yeah, no. Well,
And
Sam
Pippin
goes
and
back.
Pippi and Mary. Well, yeah, Sam gets married in the end.
I think Pippin and Merry have it in for each other. But they get married at the end too. To separate people.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
Like that wry humor.
Yeah.
They fell in love and they got married,
Yeah.
but not to each other.
Yeah.
Yeah, they've been through way too much, I think, to
Live together.
to marry each other.
I wonder-
Lifelong friends, though, for sure.
I wonder what Tolkien's stance was on homosexuality. Ugh, that might be a controversial topic.
I don't know. He grew up. He was born in 1880 something.
Yeah.
I don't know. Like does Legolas?
No,
Do elves like do that, or is it just kind of like we just have always existed, you know?
yeah, they
and
just spring out of the earth, you
Yeah.
know, like dwarves. I don't see. That's the thing. Like, we don't know how they
Yeah.
marry, how like they copulate, how they defecate. Nothing.
Yeah.
We don't know anything about bodily.
There's almost no references to bodily functions or going to the bathroom or sexuality.
Yeah.
Like throughout the entirety of the books and the films, like there's scarcely one.
Yeah.
I think in the third, we're talking about the Fellowship here,
Yeah.
but in the third, book and film, when they go to Shelob's lair, Gollum says, "There's orcs and filth everywhere." And so it's kind of like they go there, like they take shits and then they leave, and hopefully they don't get eaten by this giant fucking angry spider.
Oh my god.
That's the spawn of an ancient monster.
Yeah. No wonder Shelob's
Yeah.
angry all the time.
Yeah.
Like orcs started like pooing on my house.
Yeah, fucking orc diarrhea all over the floor.
Oh.
You know,
How did it get to this?
it's horrible.
Yeah.
Anyway, let's steer this conversation back to civilization.
Yeah. But even though we don't really know what Tolkien's like stance on homosexuality is, it's interesting to think about how like those masculine and feminine qualities are in each of the characters. Because you mentioned that Aragorn was the most masculine character, but he also heals. Like, he's a healer as well. Like, you see that when he tries to take care of Frodo after he gets stabbed, and then after the Battle of Pelennor Fields, again in Return of the King, he heals Éowyn back. And that's like, I think he's called like he had like a name attached to his healing abilities in the third book, when he was in Minas Tirith. So that's like an interesting thing, because being a healer or like a witch or using herbs is more like a female thing in medieval times. But
It's
yeah.
very true, yeah. Very true.
They all have that sort of feminine and masculine qualities to them.
So some themes that are particularly strong in the Fellowship of the Ring. The first being addiction,
Yes.
because the ring gets introduced in this book and film, and it's this great source of power, and it's a great source of turmoil and chaos in the world of Middle Earth, because the wearer or the possessor of the ring is able to become invisible and has some. It's like implied that there's some other fantastical kind of powers that they have, like they become extraordinarily strong or they become influential to people.
Yeah.
And you really get a sense in both mediums that this is something that is so addictive.
Yeah.
Like you're instantly taken to it. And it's men, like humans in the world, are supposed to be even more weak to the pull of the ring, you know, because they lust for power more.
Yes.
Yeah.
They're a lesser form of mortals, basically.
Yeah.
As opposed to like the elves. So I guess there is a bit of a racial hierarchy in Tolkien. But he still like treats them equally. But yeah, definitely. You can see from the beginning of the film, like, the ring is used in such, like, trivial ways, because Bilbo just uses it to frighten his fellow village members by, like, escaping his party. And he's like, and he, like, flips the ring and puts it back into the pocket. But you can see from early on him being, like, really worried, like, where's the ring, like, all the time, trying to figure out where it is. And
It's like if you lost like your phone.
Yeah, exactly. He has this huge attachment to it, and that's exactly where I was going to go with that. Just basically, even though Tolkien himself hated allegory, like direct comparisons between like the real world and
the ring is nuclear bombs, man.
Yeah, but you can totally see the applicability, to use Tolkien's word.
Yeah.
Of seeing the ring as like your smartphone, because it's something you can carry around with you all the time. It gives you like unlimited access to all of these superhuman sort of powers. You know, when you put the ring on and you go into like this wraith world, that's basically the digital world. Okay, come on, guys.
You're not seeing reality as it actually is.
Exactly. It's
you're
like
seeing
this gray film,
a different reality entirely.
Yeah, but it is addictive. You don't want to leave it, basically. And it takes another person like Sam to rip the phone out of your hand, basically.
Share your phone with me, Frodo. It's such a burden. No!
The phone is mine.
Go home, Sam.
You don't mean that.
Yeah. Okay, that's number 3. This is really just about all the Lord of the Rings films and books, even though we're trying to make it just about the Fellowship.
You just can't. It's such a integrated film. Like, all the themes run up through all 3 films, and they're not... You can't really talk about one without talking about the other, because it's so...
Yeah. And again, it was written as one book.
Yes.
One thing I really liked about the Fellowship was it's focused so heavily on setting out and starting the adventure. Mm-hmm. There's so much attention paid to, especially in the book, the environments that they're going through, and how they're this isn't like the Shire, and it's different because like their experience, like there's even this I'm like all excited. There's descriptions of foliage and of landforms and of mountains
and history.
Yes,
embedded into it.
Yes,
into the geography.
Yes.
Yeah, and that's a huge thing too. Like, it's just a lot of exposition in the book, but also in the film in forms of imagery, because you can think of Lord of the Rings and think immediately of like the Shire or the Ring or some evocative image, and that's basically what the Fellowship of the Ring is about. It's about setting out like, okay, this is the world that we're living in, and it's real. Yeah. And this is one story that's happening. Yeah.
And there's probably no better place in the world to film this than New Zealand, because it's so unlike, to my eye, anywhere else like on the planet. I've never even been, but just seeing all the different environments, and
it's so diverse there.
Yeah, it's really unique. Like Canada, even
yeah, it's a huge landmass, so you would get different forms, but nothing as fantastical as that.
Like New Zealand is probably maybe 3/4 as big as Ontario, Canada. Oh my god! Yet there's more. I think there's more diversity in the types of landscapes and climate biomes.
Yes, yeah.
In this one island than there is in the whole province of Ontario. Yeah. So it's probably like one of the best places in my mind to film. So going back to, starting the adventure, courage is an ongoing theme.
I know Tolkien hates when people compare courage and like battling evil to like World War I, which he himself went through, and he also saw World War II. Do you think that psychologically it kind of did influence his mind in some way, or do you think he fought against that but still wrote a fantasy about good versus evil, essentially?
I don't know. I mean, I didn't read anything in any of the forewords or the appendices or even third-party discussions of Tolkien's writing process and conceptualization. I mean, I don't even know that that's really possible, because I think that when you're putting pen to paper, I think regardless of how much you try to not broadcast your own feelings and even like desires and worries about your life and the world around you, I think it's kind of like impossible. Right. Then there's that phenomena where, regardless of what your intention was in this artistic process, your readers are going to read something different than what you thought. of course, what you are trying to write is important, but then there's the inescapable fact that your readers are going to read something that's a little bit different than what you thought, or maybe vastly different.
Yeah.
Because everyone comes from a different place. I mean, Tolkien's, and we talked about him before in our previous podcast. Like, he's coming from South Africa, Victorian era, the late 19th century. Tolkien comes from his own unique time and place in history and in the world. And then here's us in 2017 talking about it with our own
problems and vices. And Tolkien, as we know, was a great advocate of nature over modernity. He didn't even know how to drive a car properly. And he just hated modernity.
Like someone we know.
Hey! I just hit the car on the curb once, okay?
I don't know. And then promptly decided, I'm never doing this again. I started driving at 17, and I didn't get my full license until I was 22.
Yeah, I'm gonna be like 80 when I hit the road, okay? Yeah. That's when like solar powered cars are gonna be a mainstream thing.
Yeah, well, there'll be self-driving solar powered hover cars by then.
Yes.
In fact, you may not even need to drive because we'll all be integrated into the singularity.
Yes. A macrocosm of consciousness.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that is something that you can't really overlook, is that Tolkien clearly has an and I think Peter Jackson renders this quite well, even though he wants to have a very literal interpretation of what's written on the pages. He still recognizes these subconscious, psychological, psychobabble, Freudian, like Oedipus complex. I don't even know what I'm talking about. Yeah. You know what I mean?
Inferiority complex.
All this symbolism and and the communication of these ideas through this work. I think it's unavoidable to talk about this point or this like theme because as much as Peter Jackson wanted to provide like a really literal interpretation of what was written in the books, as in like looking at what the words are and making them appear on film, he was still, I would guess, committed to the idea of Tolkien came from this unique time and place. He has these unique like feelings about the world and about technology and about nature. So it's kind of it's unavoidable that a critique of what is happening in his own time and what he thinks is going to happen in the future is present in the work itself. And even in the film, the point I'm trying to make is even in the film, when Saruman has his orcs cutting down trees and like, destroying the natural world in this abstract sense, even though he's doing it literally, that is a critique of what we are doing as in human civilization across the world. We're expanding our cities. We're building on top of farmland. At least here in Ontario we are, for whatever reason.
Though we as the watcher know, like, no, the ring is like that. You could psychoanalyze Saruman for like eternity, right? Because he has this like inferiority complex kind of thing going on with the ancient Fangorn forest around him. He thinks he's all better than like these stupid stubby little trees, and he thinks that he thinks that there won't be any repercussions to destroying that forest, and he is sadly wrong, because that's how his reign of terror ends, is because the Ents come back and fight for their land, basically. But you could really see, like, Saruman, he pledges his allegiance to the ring, and if we think that that's the digital world, or like whatever technology we use, we can just think about how much we're ruining our world just for the thought of like having your like iPhone 10 or whatever it is that you really crave for. Yeah.
And that leads us to the final theme that we're going to talk about for this particular book/film, Fellowship, is evil and how complicated it is. Even though it seems like if you watch the film, it's pretty obvious who's evil. Sauron, bad guy. Ring is this kind of manifestation of evil out in the world somewhere, and he wants to take it back because he's narcissistic and megalomaniacal, and he's obsessed with power in this like incomprehensible sense, because we have no idea really why he's obsessed with power, other than just he was twisted by Morgoth and he was manipulated, and Yeah, like he's just the Dark Lord, and we don't really understand why. It's one of those big things. Like we don't understand why evil occurs. It's just one of those things that just is present in the world.
Yeah. So even if you don't have the ring, you can still be someone who's evil. If you think of Boromir, it's because of the ring that his like arrogance is sort of accentuated, and you kind of see his battle with morality and the fellowship and doing what's right for his people and stuff. And sometimes you just don't know what good is. Like, is it good, like, wielding this ring to fight Sauron, or is it good to just be humble and destroy the ring? And Boromir kind of, under the influence of the ring, he has a very hard time trying to puzzle that out. Even though we as the watcher know, like, no, the ring is bad. Like, it's irreversible. You
Stay away. What are you doing?
You can't make it into, like, the ring of fairies here. Like, it's not gonna happen. You can never use it for good. But, I mean, I'm sure if we were given the ring, like any individual in the real world, you'd still have a hard time, like, persuading yourself otherwise of using the ring.
Yeah. So this next part, we had to write a question out in order to get us going. It's a simple question. What unique aspects of the races in Middle-earth show through in the films, and how do they make them more believable?
Speaking of the ring and how it influences different people, so we see men are kind of more susceptible to the ring's power and influence. But then with the elves, it doesn't seem to harm, like, Legolas that much. But you do see it affect, like, Galadriel. Because she is a bit more of a headstrong, more powerful leader. I also love the character Galadriel because she has this, like, long history of, like, existence. And she's kind of, like, she fights the arrogance in her, almost. Like, she wants to be a good person, but she's, like, seeing, like, too much shit, right? From, like, the Silmarillion and stuff. But I think the way that the elves are portrayed in the way that they are so, like, stoic. Elves in Middle-earth are really grounded in their sorrow, and that's something that, like, the films really caught up with. Like, their time has passed, and with their existence is, like, sorrow, and you can't ever get away from that if you're an elf. You just have to leave to Valinor.
So earlier I spoke of my love for Gimli, because I think the dwarven culture is very interesting, because it actually is borrowed directly from Norse mythology. There's this race of mythical beings that live in mountains, and they dig up treasures, and they make treasures, and they're miners, and they're craftsmen, and they make the most beautiful weapons and armor and jewelry that can ever be found. And it's just nice how Tolkien had a very kind of, one-to-one, rendering of, interpretation of how this race is and how they operate. And the interesting thing is, of course, we don't see any dwarf women ever. Maybe it's in the third book, in the big appendices they might have.
Yeah, I think they're kind of, like, hidden away or something. Like, they don't really go out into the, like, world that much. It's more the men, and the women just kind of, like, they're not, like, domestic, but they're a bit more, like, insular. Yeah. Even more than, like, the whole dwarf race in general, which is very introverted. Yeah.
We see men, women, and children of every other, well, maybe not for elves, but, like, there's no elf kids running around, from what I remember, in the films at least. Yeah. And, but for dwarves, it's like, okay, there's just Gimli, and then it's just implied that there's a whole civilization of them in Erebor or wherever. The Iron Hills. Yes. Yeah. And the Blue Mountains, I think. They're also there. What I really liked was when we watched the behind-the-scenes material. We see how the team was really committed to making sure that there was a really distinctive style to every single race's clothing. But for dwarves, it was all geometric and strong and, like, robust. Yeah.
Hard lines, no curves.
Yes. Because do you look at Gimli and you think of curves? Like, no.
I bet under all that armor,
Yeah.
a nice bod.
Oh my god. Yeah. No, he probably had like, even his muscles are probably like chiseled. You know what I mean? Like chiseled, like fucking
Like
bricks.
blocks, yeah.
Yeah, like Lego bricks. Yeah. And so I like that you get that sense about them.
Yeah, the cohesiveness, basically.
Yeah.
And with the elves, they're like the complete opposite, which is great in terms of lore as well, because they have just been at each other for like millennia, right?
Oh gosh,
as
yes.
cultures, so it makes sense. Aesthetical architecture and clothing are just completely different.
Mm-hmm.
So for elves, it's more about like those elegant lines and the curves and the circularity of like immortality, basically. Like that's kind of what it's implied, because you can't wear down a circle, as opposed to like dwarven stuff, which is like you can wear down the edges.
Yeah, it's all linear.
Yeah, so for the more circular sort of nature integrated architecture and flowy robes, it's all about lasting forever, and it's not really about grandeur, which is what dwarves are about.
The Elven culture just feels more ancient. The first race that's born in the world of Middle Earth. But dwarves are pretty much second, aren't they? Or is it men? But
I think it's dwarves.
We'll talk about that when we actually get to the Silmarillion.
Yeah. And something interesting about the depiction of elves, both by Tolkien and Peter Jackson, is that there was never been a depiction of elves like that before in history. Like there've been the little fairy elves and like the mischief kind of wreaking elves, but these elves are more stoic and they're more like regal and elegant. They're
more like humans than in any other interpretation, which is remarkable, because even in the context of Lord of the Rings, they're not like humans in this context.
They're more like an idealized immortal being. If like humans could work well with nature, and if they had immortality, this is what we might have looked like.
Yeah.
That's kind of the interpretation. But you can also see in their stoicness like this sort of sorrow that's kind of created by living so long. And you don't see that in men or in dwarves because they are mortal. And that makes like the elves so riveting to watch, because you know that these people are like age old and they're weary, and they just like, even though they're like perfect gentlemen and women, like they just want to pass on into Valinor, and they know that their time is over. Mm-hmm. So it's a very interesting culture to sort of watch, because they walk very slowly, and like it's a totally different sort of feel to like the dwarves, the men, or especially the hobbits.
Yes.
Even though they seem to have an affinity towards each other, like hobbits and elves, especially Bilbo and Elrond and his people. Like it seems like they see the opposites of each other, like the homeliness versus like the elegance, and they like that aspect of each other.
Yeah. But they do have some similar character traits in that hobbits and elves are extremely courageous. I mean, really, all the races have that. Mm-hmm. I remember reading somewhere that dwarves were supposed to be, I think, a little bit more taken to cowardice or something.
Yes.
And men are obviously like very fickle and they betray each other and all that kind of crap. But I think that elves and hobbits have that same quality to them, even though hobbits are a lot more reluctant to face like danger in the outside world and that kind of thing.
Change in general.
Yeah, like, and they're just a very rustic kind of people. Mm-hmm. Elves don't really seem taken to like banal things, really.
Yeah. It's true. I think they both move very slowly, or they want to. Like elves just do that naturally. But for hobbits, they don't want to like move at all. They like burying themselves into the ground and like have a lot of food and just spend their days like that. But they don't want to face change. And elves never face change. They just kind of exist.
Yeah. So
I think that's what brings them together.
So men.
Yes.
The race of man.
Ew. Except Aragorn, he's kind of cute.
Yeah, I know. His goatee, his sword.
He's such a great, like Viggo Mortensen is such a great choice to make as.
Oh my god, yeah.
We could just go on.
It's such a well cast film trilogy.
Yeah, perfect. Absolutely,
it's phenomenal. Despite our gripes, like with Frodo's different, and
there's no Tom Bombadil. Come on.
Yeah.
What the fuck, man? I've been
Yeah.
waiting 70 years for this.
I know, I wanted to see Goldberry feed these people like butter and berries and cream. It's like they sit around all day just eating sugary, fatty things, you know?
Where's Old Man Willow?
Yeah. Fuck that guy.
He's an asshole.
Yeah.
Each actor embodies their character, like, almost in real life. Dominic Monaghan and Billy Boyd just, like, goofing around on set, playing pranks on people. You're like, that's Merry and Pippin right there.
Yeah.
Like, it's just perfect.
Yeah.
And many of them are like that. Ian McKellen is very regal and
Yeah.
stern, fabulous at the same time.
Christopher Lee has that voice.
Yeah. Very stately.
Saruman.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, his Saruman voice is not that much different from his actual voice.
But it's pretty much, it's the same. It's just him, just like, here, put like a white robe on.
Yeah.
Sound a little bit evil and smug.
Yeah.
And then boom.
Just there you go.
You got Saruman.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it was good, right? Because Saruman's supposed to have that ability where he can manipulate people with speech, and he has a very commanding,
Exactly.
manipulative kind of presence to
Perfect
him. So.
role casting. But did you know that he knew Tolkien? Tolkien wanted...
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Tolkien wanted Christopher Lee to play Gandalf.
Whoa.
Yeah. If they ever did a live cast. Yeah.
That's interesting.
Right? They were like buds. Isn't that cool?
Wow.
Yeah.
I thought I knew everything about Lord of the Rings and Tolkien. Yeah. That's pretty remarkable.
Mm-hmm.
And well, I think that he nearly cast as Gandalf
I
for
think
real?
so, maybe.
But
Yeah. Not entirely sure. Like,
yeah, Ian McKellen is definitely a better choice.
yeah,
I mean.
definitely.
Going back to Vigo, when you read what Aragorn is like in the book, you're thinking, and you picture like the way he's described and everything. It's just like the way Vigo renders that onto the screen is just wow.
Amazing.
Yeah, it's so true to form.
Yeah. Tolkien did not expect Aragorn to be as prominent of a character as he is in the actual stories. Like, he just wanted this to be about Frodo and, like, destroying the ring, but then it became this second subplot of Aragorn rising to become the king. And Tolkien was just like, okay, we'll go with that. We'll see where this goes. And that just kind of happened. Which is very interesting when you think about how his character develops.
Okay, and lastly, we're going to talk about monsters.
Yeah.
Yeah. Squid things.
Squid and goblins.
Goblins.
And Bill the pony.
Yeah.
He's not a monster.
Yeah. That's another encounter that's left out, right? Is Bill Ferny.
Yeah, Bill Ferny.
Black hair, ugly looking dude, abuses his ponies.
Yeah. Sam
know.
rescues him.
Yeah, but then he names the pony fucking Bill. Like,
yeah. What's that?
Why?
That's such a, like, weird Freudian complex.
Yeah. What? Bill the pony runs away when they get to Moria,
Mm-hmm.
and that giant squid thing attacks them.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, fuck that. And
See you later.
Bill's probably ended up as warg food, I think.
No, I like to think of him like he went back to the Shire and he just has a big meadow to himself and he's just this fat little pony. Yeah. And Sam finds him afterwards when he comes back.
Yeah. It's one of the few, one of the many unanswered things.
Yeah, but you don't like the squid scene, right? The Kraken. Right.
No, I didn't like reading it either because it seems way too random. Like it didn't read as if it was planned. It didn't have a natural spontaneity to it.
Yeah.
I think, like they leave the Shire, they go to the Barrow Downs or whatever, with and then goes even plays Skyrim with like these Draugr things that are there, like these fucking zombies that like attack them. Yeah. And then one of them ends up saving like the other three. Mm-hmm. The squid scene doesn't read as well as that. I don't think. Yeah. But to be fair, it's just strange because you think, what the fuck is this, and how is it in this shallow body of water? Where does this thing come from? Mm-hmm. Why is it in the middle of Middle Earth in like this little like pond? Mm-hmm. I think it's to prepare us for the fact that Moria is like this deep, dark, ancient place. Yeah. Goes down into the middle of Middle Earth. Yeah. And it's implied in the book, or maybe it's the second book, it's one of them, that when Gandalf is taken down fighting the Balrog, that when he defeats the Balrog and is escaping, like literally the middle of the earth, he encounters a whole bunch of these disgusting, scary, incomprehensible beings, monstrous life forms that are down there, which is just like, it's horrifying to think about it, because even though he's a wizard and he's well equipped to meet these challenges, it's scary to think that there's all these unknown creatures that are in the world beyond the threat that we all know, which is like orcs and goblins and urukai and trolls and all this other disgusting crap.
And even the known Dark Lord, which is Sauron. Like, there are greater evils that even he doesn't really know about in, like, the bowels of Middle-earth. Basically. That's, like, frightening.
Yeah.
Because even before him was Morgoth, and, like, you don't know what was, like, created during those, like, dark days, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like werewolves, vampires. Actually, yeah.
Wait, really?
I think, well, werewolves for sure. I don't know about vampires.
Oh, okay.
But probably.
You just put that in there for a shock effect.
Vampires.
And
aliens.
That is really interesting that it's kind of out of nowhere, but I think it was kind of for like a plot shield, you know, like, because it makes sense, like, if there was a threat, like, coming at them from the entrance, like, imagine if there was no squid, and they went into the Moria, like, entrance, and they see all these corpses, and they're like, oh, fuck no, we're not going this way, we're gonna diddle-daddle ourselves out of here and go, like, through a different pass, and then you wouldn't get the Moria scene. So the squid is actually, like, paramount in driving them forward into Moria, because he collapses, or it collapses the gate, and the Fellowship can't go the other way anymore. They have to go through the Moria, the long dark of Moria, as Gandalf said.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's a interesting argument that you bring up for it. Yeah. Speaking of Moria, right? Like my favorite scene.
Yes.
And then the climax of the whole film is Gandalf fighting the Balrog, and it's just,
you shall not pass.
Yeah, gotta say it more vigorous than that. You shall not pass! It slams down his staff with the sword, and, you know, Balrog's like, he just sniffs. He he puffs his nose, and he's just like, the fuck was that? I'm a Balrog. And of course he goes to crack his whip, and then the bridge collapses, and then Gandalf, like, decides to fall because, he decides to do things sometimes that are just, weird.
He just wants to end the Balrog for something. No, like, Frodo needs you.
Yeah.
Go back. Yeah. He has his own, like, strange ways, because he talks a lot about fate. And in that Moria scene, he talks about Gollum and how he still has a part to play in the entire, like, sequence of going to Mordor. Which is really interesting, because other people would just say, yeah, kill the fucker. Like, why would you keep this pitiful creature?
And why didn't they?
Yeah, and it's just, every scene with Gollum, I'm just like, ugh.
I know.
And it's not just even, like, the rendering of him, it's just the character.
He's annoying.
Yeah, and I hate the drive that he puts between Sam and Frodo. Yeah. Anyway, so Gandalf has his own mysterious ways of interacting with the world and seeing the long-term effects of things, which I guess comes with, like, his extreme age. But it is very interesting, the choices he makes, even the Hobbit, or Fellowship as well, to leave the Fellowship so they can undertake this, like, very hard journey of not trusting each other anymore, and finding, like, these strange familiars in Lothlorien who are kind of with them, kind of against them, and then they finally have to let Frodo go.
Yeah.
The rest of the Fellowship, and I don't think if Gandalf was there that could have happened. So I feel like Gandalf had this, like, extraneous, like, agenda that he didn't tell anyone else because he wanted something to go a certain way. It's just a very strange character. You just don't know how much influence he has on the course of everything in Middle-earth.
Yeah.
Just don't know.
And of course, the reason why you're bringing up Gandalf at all is because he's not actually a human. Like, he's I think he's a Maya.
Yeah, he's a Maya.
Yeah, like, and he specifically is a wizard, and he's one of the Istari, or something like that. I would have to go back and, like, do some like nerdy fact checking, but Yeah, he's not an ordinary man, like, at all. He's a different type of being entirely.
He's lived 300 human lives, basically.
Yeah.
That length of time.
Yeah, it's like several thousand years that
Yeah.
he's been around.
So if you think like a human's life is about like 100 years, let's say, like rounded up, then he's lived 100 times 300. Isn't that 300,000?
No,
No?
3,000.
No. I think it's 3 million.
No,
Wait, okay, we're gonna look this up.
there's no way we're putting this into the final cut.
Okay, it's
Okay,
30,000.
See, we're both stupid.
He's 30,000. This is what happens when you're humanities students.
Yeah. Calling all liberal arts morons.
Yeah, so he's 30,000 years old. Is he a monster?
No.
Okay. You have to appear.
To be clear, Gandalf is not a monster, but he's not from one of the primary races of the series.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I guess, well, orcs and goblins kind of do count as a primary race in the series.
Yeah.
But they're monstrous, so...
Tough, bad, too sad.
Yeah.
There's also the trolls. There's that pitiful troll in the Moria scene.
Yeah.
Who at the end, you're supposed to feel bad for him when he dies because he was just captured and like thrown into this war. And it wasn't really his fault that he was so destructive.
Yeah, it seems like, especially Sauron really likes having trolls do like these dangerous, stupid tasks.
Yeah.
Yeah. I wonder if, because they're probably not taking to evil naturally. Mm-hmm. It seems like they're almost like just giant like children.
Yeah.
That just don't know better.
Yeah.
But they're like lethal because they're huge and aggressive and.
At least cave trolls. The trolls in The Hobbit are a bit more malignant, but the cave trolls are kind of like dumb.
Yeah, because the ones in The Hobbit have British accents and they speak English.
Cockney.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
They have Cockney accents because they're like silly. That's how you portray silly British people, is if they have a Cockney accent.
I'm not even going to attempt to do it, but,
Just think of Michael Caine.
No. Oh, Michael Caine. Something like that.
That was not bad.
Oof.
I'm being generous.
Oof. But there's not really a ton in the Fellowship because we're just kind of getting introduced to the world of Middle-earth as it is. And, well, I mean, Tom Bombadil is not human either.
Yeah.
And not only that, he's not a wizard.
Yeah.
And he's a different being in of himself. Yeah. And when Gandalf and Saruman meet, this is in the book. Yeah. They discuss Bombadil.
Oh, do they? Okay.
Yeah.
I don't remember this. Yeah.
It's brief, but yeah, he's some different thing altogether. Yeah. And again, he's one of those things. There's a lot of unanswered questions about him and Goldberry. Yeah. Like, what is his role? But he does seem to have a bit of wisdom, if not,
He seems like another one of those characters who may have an influence on the course of, like, occurrences and phenomena in Middle-earth, but he doesn't, like, embody that. He's not, like, this powerful, like, Sauron-like entity, though I feel like he could be. He's like Gandalf in that respect. Like, they could take up that step to power, but they don't. They'd rather be, like, this old man figure who just enjoys life and, like, plays fireworks for hobbit kids and stuff like that. And provides, like, nourishment for wandering travelers and shows off his hot wife to all these little hobbits.
Yeah. Take a look at this. Ain't she beautiful? She's mine.
Tom Bombadil is an Italian mobster.
Yeah. Plot twist. There you go. That's all you need to know. That's why we don't hear much about him. Yeah. Well, the Eagles make an appearance in the Fellowship, right? So they do. Remember, Gandalf is saved by the eagle.
I don't get the moth, though?
I think the moth...
Is it a small version of the eagles?
Oh, I don't know.
Is it an agent of the eagles?
Yeah. I think that the moth is... I think the moth is something that he can communicate with. Mm-hmm. Like, he can speak to birds. Yeah. And moths, which I think Odin was able to do. I think he was able to speak, like, to animals and make them do things.
Right, yeah. Cool.
I could be wrong. We don't do, like, any fact-checking. We just do whatever we have in our minds. We just say. So else you're just going to hear me every second typing away. Yeah. But the eagles are there. And, of course, the eagles are the Deus Ex Machina. Mm-hmm. The very lazy Tolkien-esque. What is it? Yes. Is it Tolkienist? Tolkienian, yeah. Tolkienian plot device. Yes. Having a giant regal eagle named Gwillieth, the Wind Lord, come and scoop you up off the top of Orthanc and lead you right back to the Fellowship. Yes. Or off of Mount Doom, or after the Battle of Five Armies, or... You name it. Yeah, they come and, Gandalf's about to be killed by the Witch King of Angmar, and then, lo and behold, there's... Oh, no. Okay. Oh, my God.
You just killed it.
Oh. Shit. Well, anyway, I think that we've said enough. So, we'll see you next time. Of course, we're going to continue. How did The Lord of the Rings, a book genre that was so niche, translate into such a viewable film for a mass audience? What a lovely question. It's so well worded.
Oh, thank you. Yes. I wrote it myself.
Oh. Yeah.
So I think basically it was the level of detail that they added to their whole conceptualization of this movie, because in the behind the scenes they really talked about how they wanted to keep the core themes in there and not really worry about having every scene from the books in the movie.
Hence no Bombadil.
Yeah. Oh, such a loss.
Let's be honest, wasn't that great?
Yeah. I was like, what the fuck is going on? Because I had watched the movie before, like, reading the books, right? So I was like, who the fuck is Tom Bombadil?
No, even when reading it, it's just, it's so random. I mean, it's more random than the squid in the Moria. But yeah, I mean, I would agree. It's the level of detail, the costumes and the special effects and the CGI are just outstanding. There's such a mastery that's present that, I mean, even though like you and I know nothing really about films and about the process and about how CGI is made and all this kind of crap, but just seeing some of the films that have come out in recent years, we're in 2017 now, and just how CGI heavy they are and how when it's overused, it becomes crap. Yeah. And especially bad CGI, because you can just tell it's bad. Yeah. Like it takes you out of it, and like you're able to suspend disbelief so much when you're watching, especially The Fellowship, because it started when it was in the 90s, and then they released it in 2001. Yeah. Like, there's nowhere near the level of technology that we have today. Yet they're able to produce like one of the best films that I've ever seen. At least one of the best fantasy films I've ever seen, obviously. And the other thing too, and you brought it up earlier, which was that it was spectacularly cast, and all the human actors made the human and non-human characters in this fantasy universe seem like they had a definite grounding in the mythology of this alternate universe that Tolkien created. You can tell that they're from these ancient cultures that have been thousands of years old. There's complicated histories to them. Like elves and dwarves are not so friendly. That's why it's kind of extra special when Gimli and Legolas become like best pals. Yeah. And there's all these themes that we in the present can scoop up and relate to, and they're still pressing today in this day and age.
They're so universal, and Tolkien kind of wanted to do that with the themes. Like in his foreword he talks about applicability of the themes and how you can apply those to different eras or different contexts. And like it's so brilliant of how all the themes that he just like inherently just wrote down, because he didn't really think about like, oh, like this is like I'm gonna write about war kind of thing. Like he just kind of wrote whatever was in his heart, and it's so relatable. And I think Peter Jackson really took that essence to heart. And I think also what the success of the film does appear so well is that it relates to what Tolkien thinks fantasy is as well. So if you're a nerd of fantasy theory, you would know that Tolkien wrote his own theory about fantasy. So he wrote that even if you're writing fantasy and you're writing about the secondary world, you still have to have this inner consistency of reality. And here I insert a parenthetical citation of Tolkien, because those are his words.
Yeah, don't want to get caught for plagiarism now, do we?
No.
Yeah.
Aspiring academic, that's the worst thing you could do to me. So an inner consistency of reality. So that's not CGI. That is creating the prosthetics and the miniatures and the bigatures and all these kind of the big miniatures.
Because they're not mini. They're just like an actual fucking sculpture of like a troll. It's like huge.
Yeah. So having all of those set pieces and all these realities embedded into the actual film production, that's what makes it so real and inviting to the reader to watch, or the viewer to watch, because it seems like it just sprung out of the earth, and it's been there for thousands of years.
Yeah.
So well done, PJ.
Yep. And I mean, when you have a budget of $93 million, you can do a lot.
Yeah.
And I can't believe it made $871.5 million box office.
Oh shit.
It's probably worldwide obviously, right? But like, it's just crazy.
And this is just for Fellowship, right?
This is just for because I'm on the Wikipedia page for the Fellowship of the Ring film, and
wow,
that's just it's just crazy, right? Like,
that's insane.
Many people were made very wealthy by this film. Yes. Let's be honest.
But PJ's hair is still all over the place. Oh, PJ.
Yeah, he upgraded maybe to fancier shorts, I think.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. Yeah, that scene was funny.
Yeah.
The dude's like they're in like this part of New Zealand where there's just snow everywhere. The dude's got like a winter outfit on, but he's got cargo pants, cargo like shorts.
Peach-colored cargo pants.
Oh, God. On that note, we're going to wrap it up. Thanks for listening. And we're going to continue with the Two Towers next time.